Hey guys, it's me, Reg. Something very strange happened with the recent Vanity Fair story about the Trump White House. You've probably already heard about the story, but I don't know if you heard it from the angle that I'm about to go over. And it has nothing to do with what was said. It has everything to do with what the media decided you should focus on. And once you see how this works, you can't unsee it. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back to RPW Media, where we speak the truth that the mainstream media is too frightened to say. Now, today, we're talking about the Vanity Fair piece that you've probably heard about already that claims to give you an inside look at the Trump administration, including interviews with people close to President Trump, especially White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. Vanity Fair wants you to believe this was a candid, revealing profile. But when you slow down and actually look at how the story was constructed, something becomes obvious. This wasn't reporting. This was framing. And let's be precise. Vanity Fair didn't invent quotes. They didn't fake the interviews. What they did was something far more subtle and far more powerful. They decided which quotes would stand alone, which context would be minimized, and which explanations would quietly disappear. That's how narrative control works. Throughout this article, Susie Wiles describes President Trump as disciplined, deliberate, and intensely focused on outcomes. But that part isn't emphasized at all. Instead, Vanity Fair elevates the most colorful phrases, removes the surrounding operational context, and lets readers draw their own conclusions. When you do that, blunt management language starts to sound like dysfunction. That changes the entire meaning. Now, this is what the media doesn't want you thinking about. You don't have to lie to mislead people. You just have to decide what not to include. If every word is technically true, but the context is missing, the audience still walks away with a distorted picture. And this is what the media has done to Donald Trump and everybody in his orbit since the day he came down the escalator. Remember that infamous phone call that Trump had with Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger after the 2020 election, where the media reported that Trump ordered Raffensperger to find him enough votes to beat Joe Biden. What the media left out when reporting that story was the exculpatory part of the phone call that led up to Trump's statement. And I personally know this because a very close friend of mine, Mark Davis, who did the analysis of the voter data for the 2020 election in Georgia for the Trump legal team, pointed out that the exculpatory part that the media excluded from the reporting on that phone call was a report of the analysis of the Georgia voter data that Mark presented to the president. Trump was basically saying to Raffensperger, reading down Mark's list, you have, let's say, 33,000 people who moved from one county to another and didn't register in the county, but they voted anyway. That's illegal in Georgia and most states. You have X thousands of people who registered with the post office box, which is illegal in the state of Georgia, and they voted. You have X number of thousands of people who moved out of the state or died, and they voted in Georgia. After all those hundreds of thousands of people that he read down a list, he said, find me 11,780 votes. So the media removed all of that part of the conversation where Trump laid out how many thousands of people potentially illegally voted. And they just reported on find me 11,780 votes, making it appear that President Trump ordered a Secretary of State of the state of Georgia to cheat. Now, that's how it's done. We've seen this exact tactic before when it comes to reporting on Trump. During President Trump's first term, after the Charlottesville incident, Trump addressed the press about the dispute over removing a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee in Emancipation Park. Remember? Trump said that there were good people and bad people on both sides of that argument. He said that the people on both sides were very fine people. Well, the media immediately framed that as Trump calling neo-Nazis and white nationalists very fine people. But what they omitted was the very next part. Okay, so most people already heard this. But for the people that this is the first time you're hearing it, welcome to the truth. Trump actually condemned both hate groups in his Charlottesville speech, and that's the part that the media edited out because they wanted you to focus on the first part he said. You see, they didn't change his words, they just changed the context. Give this a watch.
So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now, we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly.
See, Trump explicitly said, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. The media didn't change his words. They removed exculpatory context, and the meaning changed completely. And that intentional omission is still believed today by many, even after they hear the exculpatory part that was removed. That's how powerful this tactic is that the media uses. In fact, Joe Biden used the Charlottesville omission lie to launch his presidential campaign for 2020. Now, here's another example from the Vanity Fair piece that really shows how this works. Vanity Fair highlighted language where Susie Wiles was describing President Trump's work style and intensity. She was talking about how he operates under pressure, how demanding the pace can be, and what it's like managing a high-intensity leader. But the way Vanity Fair presented it, that description was converted into a headline-level suggestion that Wiles was accusing Trump of having an alcoholic personality. Now, that's not what she said. She used an analogy to describe intensity and behavior patterns in a work environment. Vanity Fair reframed it as a character indictment leveled at Susie Wiles' own boss, the President of the United States. It's nonsense. Same words, different meaning. That's the trick. You take a descriptive explanation and present it as an accusation. You don't change the quote at all. You change how the audience is instructed to interpret it by omission. This is the same pattern we saw in Charlottesville, the same pattern we saw with the Raffensperger phone call. And it's the same pattern we're seeing here. Vanity Fair didn't fabricate anything. They curated perception. They elevated certain lines and buried the explanations that softened or clarified them. That's not journalism failing, guys. That's journalism being illegitimately used. And what happened next tells you everything. When the Trump team pushed back and said key context was left out, the media response wasn't curiosity. It was defense. I mean, no media outlets did any serious follow-ups, no examination of what was omitted, no interest in whether the framing was fair. They just closed ranks. This isn't really about Vanity Fair, guys. This is how legacy media operates now. They don't tell you what to think. They tell you what they believe matters and what you should believe matters. And once that decision is made, everything else becomes invisible. Now, if you felt like the news doesn't line up with reality lately, you're not the crazy ones. If stories feel incomplete or strangely slanted, that instinct is correct. You are noticing the framing. And that's exactly what they don't want. A free press isn't just about publishing quotes. It's about curiosity. It's about skepticism. It's about telling the whole story, even when it's inconvenient. When media outlets stop doing that, they stop being watchdogs. They become architects of a narrative. Journalism is not supposed to have personal narratives involved in the reporting of a story. So let me ask you this. At what point does selective storytelling stop being journalism and start being narrative engineering? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear from you guys about this. All right, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.